Please welcome back Louise Dubé of iCivics, moderating a discussion on leadership for liberty and 21st century learning with State Chiefs of Education, Steve Dackin of Ohio, Angélica Infante-Green of Rhode Island, McKenzie Snow of Iowa, and Jill Underley of Wisconsin.
So I'm extremely happy to be doing this conversation at this particular time. We bring state chiefs together. We've done it several times for the one reason that education is changing, K-12 particularly, so quickly that we actually are all extremely confused. I hope you guys are not. And then the Civics Now coalition, of which many of you are part, has passed 51 pro-civics bills and legislation in the past, in 33 states in the past 3 years. That's an unbelievable. I want to shout out Sean Healy, who's at the back there, leading that effort. We've passed them in red, blue, and purple states. But this is where the rubber meets the road. These chiefs are the folks who are going to either make that happen or find difficulties in doing so. So that's why we're bringing them together, and we know that it's going to look different depending on the socio-political context in the state, and that's why we're bringing a diversity of points of view. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to ask each of the chiefs about their state. I'm going to start in Iowa. I've told Director Snow to get ready. And then we're going to go around, and then we're going to investigate a few other questions. At the end, we will leave 10 minutes for questions. This time, we will do it on Slido. So if you have time to download the app, look at the QR code, that way we can bring in our streaming audience, and you can upvote questions, and I will go with those questions for a little while. All right, so Iowa is a hotbed of history and civics activity. Lots and lots of things happening. You had your state plan approved. You passed a bill for civic seals. What is the implementation of that going to look like in Iowa? And tell us a little bit what it looks like.
Absolutely, and wonderful to be with you all. Thank you each for your commitment to your students and your communities and to U.S. history and civics education. We are excited in Iowa to be realizing many national best practices. So recently in our 2025 legislative session, we instituted a graduation requirement to pass the U.S. citizenship and naturalization test that was piloted this current school year and will go into effect for our graduating class of 2027 and this coming school year 26-27. And as Louise indicated, just last week, both the House and the Senate unanimously passed legislation to create a Seal of Civics Excellence Diploma Seal that celebrates student knowledge and student skills in U.S. government and civics education. So in thinking through implementation, of course, we will also look to states who have implemented such seals, but we are prioritizing knowledge, which could be demonstrated through elective coursework, advanced coursework, and more. And we're also prioritizing skills, which could be demonstrated through community service, through competitions like mock trial, or even in middle school, the National Civics Bee. And then we still have additional legislative conversations. We're in the thick of our legislative session right now related to course requirements for U.S. government and civics. So in Iowa, we currently do not have course requirements in elementary and middle school. We have standards and instructional requirements, but we have in high school the requirement of 3 years of social studies, 1 year of which must be for U.S. history and 1 year of which, or excuse me, half a year of which must be for U.S. government and civics. And there are two different legislative proposals. One looks at pulling that U.S. government and civics course requirement down to middle school, grades 7 and 8, for half a year course requirement. And then also looking at expanding that high school course requirement, and instead of half a year, a full year of U.S. government and civics. So we're continued to be engaged in those conversations and excited to implement the national best practices that have been adopted in Iowa.
Let me just one follow-up question. So how is implementation, is the State Department of Ed going to help educators, or what is the plan for implementation?
For the civic seal specifically?
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, it's going before the governor's desk, so we're working on that. But our plan for implementation would be to support districts in identifying who attains the civic seal, and then we would actually produce and send the civic seals to affix to student diplomas. So we both have the statewide guidelines and then those local decision makers who know student attainment best, ultimately making an individual decision.
Great, thank you so much. We're going to switch to the smallest state in the nation, Rhode Island. Also a hotbed of civics for quite some time. There was legislation where students sued under the Constitution for their rights to civic education. You've been a state that's focused on civic engagement. What does the implementation look like? What's the roadmap look like ahead for history and civics?
Sure. When I actually went to Rhode Island, I found myself in this lawsuit.
Oh,
Hello?
maybe pick it up.
Hello? All right, why don't I hold it? Okay. So when I got to Rhode Island, I found myself in this lawsuit. What was interesting is that they didn't really need to sue us to do this because I was really excited about getting it done. So one of the things that we did with this whole group is that we sat down and we looked at all the things that they were requesting, which was civics education. In 2021, there was legislation that was passed, and we had the Civics Act. And what that said is that we have to have standards for civics. We've had to have, students have to demonstrate proficiency, as well as they have to have a student-led capstone, either in middle school or in high school. But it starts in 8th grade. So what we did with our standards that I think is really important, because our standards were actually, we completed our standards in 2023, and they're K-12. Civics is in every single one of the strands. So it starts from kindergarten, and that was important for us. So it wasn't a course here or something there that, you know, it runs across every single one of them. The important part about that also is that the capstone, you could do it in middle school or you could do it in high school. And what we wanted was really hands-on. We didn't want kids just to memorize things, but to really deliver on real-world problems, and that's what they're doing right now. Full implementation will be in 2027. And your question earlier about how do you support with implementation, we've done a couple of things. The first is that we have a guidebook that we created with teachers so that we can include our differently abled students, our multilingual learners, really what our expectations are for the civics standards, what does it look like in the classroom, and then we got together and we selected curriculum. So we have a list of approved curriculum that we did with superintendents, principals, teachers, with SERP, many different organizations to actually say these are the lists of curriculum, core and supplemental. So that's important. We also created an asynchronous course on Canvas that you go in and there's a toolkit that you could utilize to unpack and really to have this kick off at the district level. And right now we have the civic ambassadors, which are district people that come do professional development with us, help us unpack all of it. They go back and do the trainer model. So there's a lot going on in Rhode Island in terms of civics education. It's something that we feel very passionate about, and anywhere you open up any one of our standards, you're going to see it front and center. And it is about developing something. I want to stress, we don't want kids memorizing. We want kids to be active participants. We have legislation day. We are working with the Bar Association in Rhode Island so that it all comes to life. And that is, that's heavy. It's a heavy lift, but it's exciting because that's where we are. Class of 2027, next year, full implementation.
Wonderful, wonderful. You may be small, but you're mighty. I was going to go to Director but I'm going to go to you, Superintendent Underly, in Wisconsin, because I've heard that you are leading an effort that's very similar to the effort across all grades and across disciplines for social studies and for civics and history. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening in Wisconsin?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me okay? Just making sure. Okay, great. First of all, thank you so much for being here this afternoon. I'm a former social studies teacher in high school, so this is just incredible professional development for me too, so thanks for being part of this. When I started, I'm elected, so that's also somewhat unique and a dying breed, I think, when it comes to state superintendents nationally. The other unique aspect of it is that my position is nonpartisan. So I'm not elected during the partisan elections in the state. And to me, that's really important. And as the state superintendent, my job has been to set the vision. And one of the things that I came in on was civics education. So what we did when I started in the administration in 2021 was we revised our scope and sequence for social studies and civics education specifically. From kindergarten all the way through high school. And then we also, and these were teachers in the state of Wisconsin that developed this, they developed some standalone courses in civics education. And all of this is found on our website. So if you went to the department's website, you can find this information if you wanted to use any of it. And then we also created civics fellows, similar to what Commissioner Infante-Green has in Rhode Island, where we have 15 statewide civic fellows who then work in their various regions providing professional development through our education service agencies to teachers in those regions. And what we do is through this initiative, we promote local history and local government as that basic unit of democracy in our communities. So students from the very earliest ages understand what community is. They understand what public service is. And they understand that public education is critical to democracy, that you can't have democracy without a strong public school system, and you can't have a strong public school system without democracy. So they're making those connections really early on that we build on then throughout high school.
Thank you so much. All right, and last but not least, Director Snow in Dackin in Ohio.
Listen, I've been called worse.
So here we are. There's a lot happening in Ohio. You have a high school requirement. You've got an assessment. You've got civic seals. There's also a bill right now that would replace the assessment. How do you feel about that? And what is the plan overall for civics and history in Ohio?
Well, those were loaded questions right there.
Right,
loaded.
Good.
Well, first of all, thanks for the invitation to be here. I'm humbled to be here. Shout out to Checker Finn, who was on your steering committee. I also saw Stephanie Sanford out there, a good friend of mine. And thanks to all you. I, too, am a former social studies teacher, but I'm going to one-up Jill because my governor is a former social studies trained teacher as well, and then he went into the dark side and went to law. So I can say that.
Excuse me?
I can say that because my daughter's an attorney. So this has been a passion of Mike DeWine for a long time, and so all those things you just mentioned are all true. We've had a civic seal for a number of years now that will qualify you for graduation. You have to sit for. Also, you can sit for American Government, American History standardized exam to qualify for graduation also. And then to your point about a bill, we do have a bill that's been introduced that would replace the American Government exam with a civic citizenship test, similar to what folks coming new to the country would take. We've offered some comments to that. We don't really want to see government go away. We think we can combine those so that those things that are on that test are integrated into an existing government curriculum so that kids are actually assessed on it and teachers can identify what skills and knowledge that they are acquiring as a result of that. So that's kind of where our feedback has been on the bill. I think Senator Kaler, who's the sponsor of the bill in Ohio, is very much interested in our feedback, and so we'll see where the bill goes. Let me just say where we are now also. The governor and I convened teachers I'm not elected, I'm appointed by the governor. But the governor and I met with a group of teachers at his gubernatorial residence a year and a half ago. Teachers K through 12 in social studies, only social studies teachers. And we wanted to use them as a focus group to tell us the good, the bad, and the ugly of what was happening in Ohio. Because my daughter's a third grade teacher in Columbus City Schools, our largest urban district. I've got 3 nieces and a nephew who are all teachers in elementary, and they all said the same thing to me, and these teachers confirmed it, that social studies was taking a back seat to ELA and math, particularly in our elementary schools. And that just can't be. So what we decided to do is a couple things. We now have integrated ELA and social studies standards together, integrated curriculum. We've reduced the number of standards in social studies, because the other thing we heard from teachers is, I can't get through all the content kind of thing. So working with that same group of teachers we convened, those teachers helped us sort those out, reduce the standards so they could do what they wanted to do. We've also then added what we call durable skills. We have a seal in Ohio that you can get for graduation called the Ohio Means Job Readiness Seal. Theoretically, it measures those durable skills that we all hear employers want, those soft skills sometimes it's referred to. We've taken that and integrated into our K through 8 ELA and social studies standards. So kids are getting all those things as they go through the state. Stay tuned, we are releasing it this spring for the fall, so that our schools in Ohio will be able to use that new model curriculum, because it is a curriculum. It's just not a set of standards. It is a curriculum for our schools in the fall.
So I'm hearing a lot of similarity in terms of integration across disciplines, integration across the different grade levels. So that's really interesting for me. Let's switch. I always have 50 times more questions for you than I have time. But let's switch to a different theme of this conference about pluralistic civic education. We heard Jill Lepore talking about the importance of having these conversations across difference, which we do in this community all the time. There have been a lot of calls for higher ed to do better at that. Do you think it belongs in K-12 classrooms? Are teachers ready to do that? Let's start with Dr. Underley.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I do believe it needs to start young. Like, we can't wait until kids are in high school or kids are in higher ed. Because government and civics and democracy is all around. And it's really important when students are young that they understand that our schools are those incredibly diverse places. It's probably the most diverse place that they'll be in. And in our schools, they learn to work with one another, they learn about differences, they learn how to debate and discuss, they learn how to cooperate with one another, and those are the founding building blocks, really, of what a democracy is and democratic society. And so when we reinforce that from a young age, and students then take that with them throughout, and it's interdisciplinary. It shouldn't just be in standalone social studies courses. It needs to be written throughout the entire curriculum, and it needs to be practiced. And those lived experiences and practicing democracy, and I think the most common one we think of is, like student council, but it's really even more basic than that. And so it needs to start young.
Thank you. And so, Director Dackin, what do you think? Belongs in the classroom, doesn't belong in the classroom? Are educators ready to do that? Are your communities ready to have these debates across points of view?
Well, once upon a time when I was a social studies teacher, we did have those conversations in our classrooms. And we infused debate-like structures into our classrooms to help young people figure out, how do I debate these topics? So I think, just in terms of a couple things, I think it's in the classroom. I also think it's outside the classroom. And it should be a community-based conversation, frankly. And because this isn't just about, helping a particular population in our culture figure it out, because it's really an adult phenomena as well. My teachers tell me, when we had the focus group, the high school teachers told me that they started not talking about certain things in our state for fear of repercussions. How sad a commentary is that? And so by bringing this back in a structured way in our classrooms, deeply thinking about how do we help teachers, help kids understand the role of civics that plays in our society, is so very, very important. And we are going to continue to emphasize that in all things that we do in Ohio through our assessment system as well as the standards that I just articulated.
That's fantastic. Commissioner Infante-Green, teachers are afraid. We just heard it. How can we make them feel safer to have those conversations that are really important to have in the classroom? And is that something that you think is something we should do?
Well, I don't think we have a choice, right? This is where we are right now. Because we haven't had the conversations, we're in this space where now everybody's fearful about not saying the wrong thing or not having the right dialogue. But the foundation of democracy is that. And I think that we know that it is very difficult, and we have to help and support the teachers. We can't just say, go and have the conversation. And that's why, and I meant to bring it with me, the guidebook that we have, it's online, you can look at it, talks about how to actually have those conversations, how to make sure that they're productive, that all sides are heard, and that we're informing the parents. Because if a student comes home and says, guess what I learned today, X, Y, and Z, and it is not what the family believes or the conversations that are happening, they can be very conflict-driven, and that's not what we want. We want to be able to have those conversations at all levels. So that's what we're doing, is really working that out with our teachers, because you just can't say, go teach this. You have to be able to have the tools and the skill set to be able to have those very difficult conversations. I think we are struggling with that as adults.
Right. It's unfair to Katie. Director Snow, we just heard how important the whole community, the school community is. You have a very proactive pro-civics and pro-history agenda. Are school administrators and parents on board with that? Because I'm asking because if they're not, then it's going to be very hard to be successful, right?
I believe that it's a shared imperative across communities to ensure that an outcome of our social studies education is strengthening civil discourse. And just going back to the earlier question, to provide yet another concrete example of supporting educators and neutrally facilitating civil discourse. We are actually in partnership with Sphere, Cato Institute Sphere, one of the partners here today, launching a statewide professional learning series tomorrow to support educators in civil discourse that focuses on constitutional principles, primary texts, and balanced content. Because we know that civil discourse, respectful dialogue ensures that ideas can compete in the marketplace of ideas, and only when ideas compete do they ultimately improve.
That's great. Only because we're running out of time and we cannot have a panel without AI. Director Dackin, how do you believe, this is a very quick question, we're going to go in very short order, do you believe AI gives us an opportunity to actually change what is important in the schools, what is center in our schools, and specifically, in our view, history and civics?
Yeah, I do. So in Ohio, we have an AI model state policy. By the end of June, all our districts have to have an AI model policy. We also have guidebooks around AI, toolkits around AI. We're pretty much out in front on this in Ohio for lots of reasons, most of which I think are economic, to be honest. We have our little plethora of data centers popping up over through our state. I think the one thing that AI is going to do, among many things, it's going to accentuate the need for those durable skills, the ability to think critically, to learn how to learn, to collaborate, to work well with others. Critical thinking is going to separate us from the machine, at least right now.
Right. Can we go quickly down the line?
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity for us at this moment, and I think we have to harness that opportunity. For our students, like you've already heard, we also have AI standards, we have critical thinking skills, and we embed it into all the curriculum and all our standards. But I think one of the challenges that we're having is really looking for really good critical source data that isn't altered by AI, because a lot of that information sometimes is not credible, and our students, so one of the things that we're working with our students is to identify what is actually real and what is AI. And I think that's a really difficult thing to do within our education system right now.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think just building on what my colleagues indicated, AI also does highlight the importance of durable skills, employability skills, and so many of those are demonstrated and practiced in civics education. So skills like strong communication, especially in critical conversations, adaptability, analytical thinking, problem solving, those are all skills that you study in US history and US government and civics, where America has had the greatest realizations of those skills, had the greatest failures of those skills, and then students themselves practice those skills. So we really want to make those career connections explicit for our learners and for our educators and for our communities. One way Iowa has done that is including specifically career connections in our standards, in our instructional materials, and then our professional learning, so that we explicitly make those connections for communities.
I won't repeat anything anybody else said because it was all spot on, but I would just add the media literacy aspect and being able to, and social studies especially, civics, is being able to look at primary sources and having students be able to understand the differences. So that would be my addition.
Well, we found a rousing call to more civics and how we're going to do this. So I want to thank you for that. We're going to go to questions now. Sadly, I can't read them, so I can only read the ones that I can see. So that may not be the ones that are most upvoted for now, but somebody might be able to give them to me. What can civil society organizations such as the Rhode clubs and the League of Women Voters do to support civic learning? In other words, I think from your points of view, like, do you partner with those organizations, and what and how? If anybody, let's just get one person to answer this, and then we'll just go and get more questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Partnering is critical when we think about any of these organizations, these civil society organizations. They're excellent partners. Often they run, different forums, or for voter reach out, or even scholarship competitions. But they also provide materials and opportunities for our kids.
Great, thank you so much. We're going to go to questions about parents. So you mentioned parents and the importance of parents, but people are feeling like, yeah, but how do you do that? Like, this is not easy to do. So anybody have an answer for that? Maybe.
Yeah. All right. So you said you were going to give it to me, so here it is. So, like Jill mentioned, we worked with all these different organizations, and part of what we did when we were building our standards is that they helped us build the standards, and then we went out into the community and actually talked to the parents, heard their voice, things that they were worried about. There was a lot of consternation about what we were doing, and it was during a time that 2023 was a little dicey in our state, and we brought in the parents and we unpacked it. This is what we mean by that. This is what this looks like. And we did sessions with parents out in the community. We videotaped a lot of the sessions so that parents can continue to watch and hear the questions being answered. So we didn't just put up the standards for people to respond to them. We went out into the communities with all the different groups that helped us write the standards to really show them what it meant, and to have some of these debates and conversations in a very respectful manner, and for them to actually understand. There was this feeling that we were going to teach in a certain way that was different than what they expected. And once they got it, we really didn't hear any noise at the end of the day.
Right. So, in other words, it takes intentionality to sort of bring them in. Just no.
If I can just add very briefly. So one component in Iowa standards revision process, we specifically had applications that invited our educators, our administrators, our institutions of higher education, community partners, employers, and parents to be a part of the standards revision committee.
I'm going to take a more macro view. This is unrelated but related. And that is, the American high school is an amazing, resilient institution. By all data, it is not meeting the needs of all kids. the way we structure it, the way we do it. But that takes, because I was a former high school principal also in my life, which is why I look the way I do. But it takes to go out and engage communities around what they want for their, what aspirations do they want for their young people. And if you're going to change that institution that's so hardened over time, the community has to say and has to demand it. And we are initiating that process in our state now, thanks to some philanthropic dollars as well, of having school districts go out and engage their communities around what they want for their students who go through that age group of kids that goes through what we now call high school.
So you're going to run some kind of process to get...
I'm not running it, but we are going to provide a framework.
Well,
Now
we're
remember,
holding you accountable.
listen, we have 611 school districts in our state. We have another 700 charters and charter non-publics, all with their own governance structure. We are a home rule state, much like Iowa. So it isn't that this can be mandated from the state. But I can tell you there is interest in our state to do this.
Yeah, just to build, just really briefly, just to build on with what Commissioner Green said also in Rhode Island, is that you have to go out and you have to engage the community in listening sessions to get what the parents want, like Ohio had said as well. But you have to do this. We did this with our strategic plan, but what I take away from this is that that's how you become innovative. Like when you can meet the needs of everybody in your community because you're listening to what their needs are, things develop, like Portrait of a Graduate, for example, which a lot of states are doing. So.
Right. One of the most frequently upvoted question was about the citizenship exam. Some of you have it, some of you don't, or is in legislation. It's a rote memorization, is what the questioner was saying. Are you guys in favor? Yes, no?
So we have it in our state, and I'm particularly not in favor of the assessment itself. I'm in favor of the content, of course, that it teaches. But what we've learned from it is that we teach all the information on there, so the kids take it. They have to take it in order to graduate. But we have them take it as freshmen in high school, and then what we find is that 90% of them are passing it when they're freshmen. Then we know that we're doing a fairly good job of educating them on civics before they're even in high school.
Our next question is about,
Sorry to keep piggybacking. And obviously, we've adapted that assessment to be able to be administered in classrooms. But before we leave the concept of assessment, we haven't yet talked about national assessments and NAEP, if I may.
McKenzie was going to
Thank you. So NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, we are excited is administering for the first time since 2022 U.S. history and civics in grade 8 right now, so in spring of 2026. But we know when they were last administered in 2022, in U.S. history, we had a 5 percentage point decline nationally from 2018 and a 9 percentage point decline nationally from 2014. And then we also saw moderate declines in civics, down 2 percentage points from 2018. So we hope for and we expect growing knowledge and outcomes in this most recent administration. But in talking with educators and administrators across the state and across the nation, additional components that could be helpful would be more frequent administration of NAEP in U.S. history and U.S. government and civics. So instead of every cycle, for example. We could also have state level results. Currently, we only have national results. And then those frameworks to build those assessments were last reviewed and revised in 2018. There's a current revision process underway, but those are critical tools for states as they build assessments, standards, instructional materials, professional learning that we look forward to having updated frameworks.
Can I add something to that?
Because you serve on NAGB.
That's right.
Thank you.
So when you said it more, I was like, no, we're not doing that.
a little controversy here?
It's always controversy. No, and when you asked about the exam, right, I think it's very interesting because you can pass it, but applying it is very different. When you take that citizenship exam, I can tell you that I have an autistic son who, if I gave him that exam, he would pass. If you ask him how to apply it, or anyone else, they won't be able to do that. So for me, and I mean, everybody has a different view on this, but for me, really understanding it and unpacking it and really having hands-on projects. I'm not saying not having an assessment, not in lieu of, but I think that we have to really make sure that our kids actually understand how it works, not just reciting what is there, because a sixth grader could pass that test if we really wanted to give them that exam. I know when my mother took her citizenship, I helped her with it, and I was in sixth grade.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I would be, for those of you who are educators in the room, the NAGB is asking for comments about the revision of the frameworks. Please feel free to log in comments, because we wanted this to be a very open conversation about how the framework should evolve. As we've said, it's quite old.
And I think Jill said that earlier in her remarks about you live you live civics. It isn't just what you memorize, but you actually act on it every single day.
Yes, 100%. One of the questions that a lot of people care about is high quality materials in elementary schools. There's not too much out there right now. Is that a need that you feel, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes, okay.
We do it in Ohio.
You do it,
Yeah, we've made that available to our teachers
yeah.
in all our core areas.
So you have made available curriculum, actual curriculum,
In ELA and social studies.
in
yes.
ELA and social studies. What about the rest of you?
We have not, because we don't have a state school board. I think that's the other unique thing about Wisconsin. But so we rely on professional organizations like this one, or the Wisconsin Council for Social Studies, and different foundations that provide these materials, and they're vetted and nonpartisan. But we also, from the state agency side, we reinforce the materials out to our different groups of teachers through our civics fellows, through our standards, but then also just primary sources. I mean, it's a really cool activity. For example, like we heard earlier about like a constitutional convention, talking to elementary school students about what they would put in a constitutional convention now versus 250 years ago, just having those kinds of conversations, or approaching it from the rights of them or the rights of their pets. I mean, there's all different ways that we can talk about civics and using high quality materials.
Yes, Dr. Steph.
I say we don't provide them, we vet them with the teachers and principals. School teams have to come together and we vet the curriculum. And we have a list of approved curriculum. We don't mandate which one they have to use.
Same,
So-
by the way.
So we do not have a list of approved curriculum from which you must choose. We have local decision-making and high-quality instructional material selection, but we really work to make evidence-based choices easy choices by providing statewide information that is clear and actionable about the alignment to the evidence. And then we've partnered with organizations like our State Historical Society that was funded by the Library of Congress to develop required primary text toolkits in early grades with vocabulary lessons affixed to them. There are also many providers of high quality supplemental instructional materials that are free here today. And then I will just put in a quick note for our 2025 Iowa Teacher of the Year. Melanie Bloom, who is an ag educator and an instructional materials expert. In Iowa, 1 in 5 of Iowans earn their living in ag or in an ag-related industry. So she is developing statewide and nationally free ag history instructional materials. So please look out for those.
I want to qualify
Thank you.
just one thing.
Okay.
We do require high-quality instructional materials to be used for literacy in our state. You can choose, districts can choose off that list. All other materials are optional. They don't have to use them.
I see. Okay, that's very important. All right, we're going to end with this last question because I love this question. How can we get our state legislature to realize how imperative it is to learn about history, and I'm going to add in civics, just as much as ELA and math? Is this something you consider your role to try to educate the state legislature?
So I'll start with us. House Bill 96, our biennium budget bill just passed last year, required the Department of Education and Workforce to integrate ELA and social studies standards with civics and Ohio history taught at every grade level. So that was, we recommended in the executive as introduced budget. The legislature funded it. Not a lot of money, but they funded it. And so yes, the legislature in our state is very much interested in expanding civics.
Great.
Same for us in Rhode Island. In 2021, they passed the Civics Act, and after that, we have had resources to create some of these ambassador programs, the asynchronous course, and when I got to Rhode Island, I didn't have a social studies teacher at the state level. So that was an investment that was made for us to be able to do this work across the state. So it's been really important for us to have it in statute.
Great.
Thank you. I think, as demonstrated by the legislative activity across the stage, that is recognized. And I do believe that starts with knowledge. It starts with knowledge of U.S. government, of its functions, of our rights as citizens, of our responsibilities as citizens. Iowa State motto is "Our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain." And then that is the bedrock for meaningful participation in civic and community activities and in true civil discourse. So we are excited to continue to partner with the legislature to implement those priorities.
Yeah, and I concur. It's all our jobs, really, to educate the legislature. I mean, you see it from the state agency, but we also see it through our museums and through our public libraries and of course, our schools and our families and our local communities. So it's a group project.
Wow, a group project. Well, this is a group project. Please join me in thanking these fantastic state chiefs. Thank you so much.